Welcome to Haunted Podcast with your hosts, Gary and Emily.
So glad to have you all with us today.
Yeah, we have an amazing deep dive for you.
Yeah.
But first, I want you to imagine something. Picture the distant, heavy rumble of thunder, rolling across this dark Appalachian Valley.
Oh, that is setting a mood right away.
Right. And then a sudden booming crash just completely shakes the ground beneath your feet. And that is followed immediately by this eerie mechanical hissing sound echoing through these dense fog-covered woods.
That sounds absolutely terrifying.
It really does. And if you enjoy exploring the unknown with us, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to the Haunted Podcast channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive into the unexplained.
Yes, definitely do that.
And hey, let us know in the comments below right now, do you believe we've been visited by extraterrestrials? Because today we are taking you right into those dark woods to explore, one of the most chilling, well-documented, and visually distinct encounters of the 20th century.
We really are.
Yeah, we are talking about the September 12th, 1952 incident in Braxton County, West Virginia.
Yeah.
The legendary Flatwoods Monster.
It really is a fascinating journey we have ahead of us today. I mean, we are going to explore the terrifying night the sky literally seemed to fall,
Yeah.
And we will look at corroborating localized sightings from the surrounding areas that strongly suggest a genuine paranormal or maybe extraterrestrial event actually took place.
Which is just wild to think about.
Exactly. And then, of course, we are going to rigorously examine the skeptical scientific explanations that attempt to debunk the whole mystery.
Got to look at all sides, right?
Always. And finally, we will look at how this terrifying, towering entity became a global pop culture icon and, strangely enough, a massive economic powerhouse for a small rural community.
It's such a weird trajectory for a monster story. But to really understand what happened that night, we cannot just look at the event in a vacuum.
Oh, you really can't.
We have to understand the world these people were living in at the time. I mean, the psychology of the era plays a massive role in how this entire event unfolded.
It's crucial context.
Right, because we are talking about early 1950s America. The year is 1952. The Cold War is peaking. And atomic anxiety isn't just like some abstract political concept for them.
Oh, not at all.
It is a daily, visceral reality for every single American.
The cultural atmosphere at that time was just incredibly tense. You had school children practicing duck and cover drills on a weekly basis, hiding under wooden desks as if that would somehow protect them from a nuclear flash.
Which is so crazy to think about now.
It really is. And families were out digging up their backyards to build concrete fallout shelters.
Yeah, the paranoia was just everywhere.
Exactly. The government was broadcasting civil defense films continuously, so the collective psychological state of the entire country was one of absolute hypervigilance. I mean, everyone was constantly looking up at the sky, just waiting for the other shoe to drop.
And the thing is, they weren't just looking for Soviet bombers either.
No, they weren't.
This is what makes 1952 so incredibly important for our deep dive today. Because 1952 was a massive landmark year for the unexplained.
It really was a banner year for it.
Yeah, the United States was fresh off some of the most significant and public UFO flaps in modern history.
And that high alert apocalyptic anxiety, it wasn't just confined to, Washington bureaucrats, but ironically, Washington is exactly where the phenomenon made its grand entrance.
Oh, man. The D.C. sightings.
Yeah, just weeks prior to the Flatwoods incident in July of 1952, you had the famous Washington, D.C. UFO sightings.
Which were huge.
Massive. We were talking about unknown, anomalous objects being tracked on military radar, visibly buzzing the White House and the Capitol building.
Right in the restricted airspace.
Exactly. Commercial airline pilots were reporting glowing spheres out their windows. The military actually scrambled F-94 interceptor jets to chase these things, and the objects outmaneuvered them effortlessly.
I can only imagine reading the morning paper back then.
It must have been surreal.
You have radar operators,
Yeah.
highly trained military personnel, going on the record saying that unknown craft are operating in restricted airspace, and the military literally cannot stop them.
Right. They were powerless.
And the U.S. Air Force was actively investigating these phenomena through Project Blue Book, which, was their official program to study the UFO threat. So that news bleeds into the most isolated pockets of the country.
Even deep into Appalachia.
Exactly. Even in rural West Virginia, people are primed. They are sitting on a powder keg of paranoia, just ready to believe that visitors, whether they are terrestrial enemies or something from another world, could drop from the clouds at any second.
Which brings a whole new layer of tension to a quiet, late summer evening in the tight-knit community of Flatwoods.
Sets the stage perfectly.
It really does. So it is dusk, around 7:15 p.m. on September 12, 1952. We have two brothers, 14-year-old Edward and 12-year-old Freddie May.
Okay.
And they are playing out on the lawn of the Flatwoods Elementary School with their friend, Tommy Heyer.
Just a normal Friday evening for a bunch of kids. And twilight is starting to settle over the Appalachian Hills. Oh. And if you have ever been in that part of the country, you know how heavy and thick the atmosphere gets as the sun goes down?
Oh, yeah, it gets very moody.
The shadows get long, the air cools down, and this dense mist often starts rolling through the valleys.
And right as that twilight sets in, they see it.
Here we go.
A bright, fiery object streaks across the darkening sky, but it doesn't just pass over like a shooting star, you know?
Right, it behaves differently.
Yeah, it appears to slow down, actually altering its trajectory, and it seemingly crashes right into a nearby hillside on a property owned by local farmer G. Bailey Fisher.
Wow. Now put yourself in the shoes of a 12-year-old in 1952.
I would be terrified.
Or excited. You just watched a glowing, pulsing fireball land on your neighbor's farm. I mean, the curiosity would be absolutely overwhelming.
For sure.
But they are smart enough to know they shouldn't just go wandering up a dark mountain by themselves. So they bolt straight to the May home to tell Edward and Freddie's mother, Kathleen May.
And Kathleen's reaction is very telling here. Her kids run in, completely breathless, pointing up at the hills, talking about a fallen star or a crashed ship.
She's frantic, probably.
Very much so. But she is intrigued, and she's also a pragmatist. She is likely concerned about a potential brush fire starting on the Fisher farm, or perhaps a small private plane having engine trouble and going down in the woods.
Right, something grounded in reality.
Exactly. So she decides they need to go look, but she doesn't go alone.
No, she recruits a local 17-year-old named Eugene Lemon. And this detail, I think, is critical to the entire story.
It really is.
Because Eugene isn't just some local teenager hanging out on a Friday night. He is an active National Guardsman.
Right, he has training.
Exactly. This is a young man with military training. He understands discipline, he understands chain of command, and he is trained to keep his composure in high-stress situations.
That is a very important point to remember.
So he grabs a flashlight to lead the way. And they're also joined by two other local boys, Neil Nunley and Ronnie Shaver, and the May family dog, a terrier mix named Richie.
So we have a search party of 7.
Yep.
One mother, a trained National Guardsman, a handful of youths, and a dog. They start the hike up the dark, mist-covered hill.
And the terrain there is tough.
Oh, the terrain in Braxton County is incredibly rugged. The trees are thick, the brush is heavy, and the fog is just thickening as the temperature drops.
So it's hard to see much of anything.
Exactly. The sensory deprivation is really starting to take hold. The flashlight beam can only pierce so far into that gloom.
And as they near the crest of the hill, the entire atmosphere just shifts. The dog, Richie, reportedly runs ahead of the group, barking seriously at something unseen in the dark.
All right.
But then, almost immediately, the dog comes sprinting back down the trail, absolutely terrified, and cowers behind the group.
Which is very unusual.
Extremely, because animals have highly attuned senses. They pick up on infrasound, they pick up on pheromones, and sense that we humans cannot even begin to register.
Very true.
Whatever Richie encountered up there didn't just startle him. It triggered a sheer uncontrollable flight response.
And the behavior of the dog is a massive indicator that there was an active, threatening presence in that environment.
Yeah, dogs don't just act like that for no reason.
Right. Dogs bred for rural environments are not typically frightened by standard woodland creatures. They chase raccoons, they bark at bears.
They are fearless, usually.
Exactly. To turn tail and hide behind humans suggests an encounter with something entirely foreign to its biological programming.
But the group presses on. Their anxiety undoubtedly skyrocketing at this point.
Oh, it had to be.
They finally reach the top of the hill. They look out into the gloom, and through the thick canopy and the fog, they observe this pulsing, rhythmic red light in the distance.
A pulsing light.
Yeah, not a steady flame like a brush fire, but a mechanical, rhythmic pulsation.
So Eugene Lemon, taking the lead, raises his flashlight. He shines the beam directly into the darkness, aiming right toward that pulsing red glow.
And the beam cuts through the fog, and it illuminates something straight out of a nightmare.
Truly.
Standing right near that pulsing red light is a massive figure. And the description of this entity is so bizarre, so incredibly specific, that it has remained famously consistent for over 70 years.
It is such an iconic description.
Tell us about it.
Well, the physical scale of the entity is the first thing that registers with the witnesses. It is towering. They estimated it stood anywhere between 7 and 10 feet tall.
10 feet tall.
Yes, it completely dwarfed the human standing before it.
Okay, let's talk about the face, because this is where it gets really weird.
It really does.
They described it as a dark, round, blood-red face. But what makes it truly iconic is what surrounded that face. It had this distinct, pointed, spade-shaped hood.
Like a playing card.
Exactly. The witnesses almost universally describe it as looking exactly like the ace of spades from a deck of cards, acting as a rigid cowl just framing this crimson face.
And within that dark red visage, they observed glowing eye-like openings.
Right.
But they didn't describe them as eyes in the human sense. They described them as emitting a piercing orange-green light.
Wow.
It is a crucial distinction. The light wasn't reflecting off of a surface. It was actively projecting out from within the entity.
That is horrifying. And moving down the body, the creature possessed twisted, spindly, claw-like hands that seemed to extend awkwardly from its torso, almost as if it lacked proper jointed arms entirely.
Very unnatural.
Very. And its lower half was entirely non-human. It wasn't standing on legs. It was described as a dark green or metallic skirt-like apparatus.
Yeah, they called it a dress.
Right, they called it a dress, but they noted it had heavy, rigid folds, almost like pleated armor or metallic machine casing.
Then the entity reacts to the sudden illumination of the flashlight beam. It emits a sharp, incredibly loud, high-pitched hissing sound. Oh, man.
And rather than stepping or walking forward, it glides.
It glides.
Yes, it levitates unsteadily, almost mechanically, straight toward the group, hovering above the ground.
Absolute pure terror takes over right then. Lemon, the trained National Guardsman, screams in horror. He physically drops the flashlight.
Just drops it.
The entire group turns and scrambles down that dark hillside in a state of blind, frantic panic.
This is where we see a complete breakdown of cognitive processing. I mean, this wasn't a calculated retreat. This was an immediate, overwhelming shock to the nervous system.
Wait, hold on. Let's pause right here, because this is where a lot of skeptical theories start to form.
Sure.
People say, oh, they just got scared by a shadow. But think about the physiological mechanism of fear. We are talking about a National Guardsman.
Right.
Someone who is literally trained for combat, trained to hold his nerve under pressure. When a soldier screams, drops his gear, and sprints down a mountain in the dark, doesn't that tell us we aren't just dealing with a simple trick of the light?
I would say so.
That is a total system override. You are talking about the amygdala hijack.
Okay, what of that?
It is a very real, documented psychological phenomenon. The human brain, specifically the amygdala, is constantly scanning the environment for threats. When it encounters something that it can categorize, say a bear, a falling tree, an armed enemy, it triggers a controlled response.
It relies on training.
Exactly, relying on training and experience. But when the brain encounters a stimulus that completely defies categorization, a stimulus that breaks the laws of physics and biology as it understands them, the amygdala bypasses the rational thinking part of the brain entirely.
It just shuts down logic.
Yes. It triggers an uncontrollable flight response. The training flies out the window because the brain concludes that fighting is biologically impossible.
That makes perfect sense. It wasn't just fear, it was ontological shock.
Yeah.
Their reality literally broke for a few seconds.
Precisely.
And what is incredible about this is the consistency of the witnesses' testimonies over the following decades. Kathleen May never wavered from her account.
She really didn't.
She didn't embellish it to sell books. She held firm to exactly what she saw. Later in life, when interviewed by researchers, she described the creature not just as a monster, but as majestic.
And that specific word choice is profound. Majestic implies a sense of awe mixed with the terror.
Right.
It suggests she saw something of incredible design or presence, something that left a permanent, vivid, and highly detailed imprint on her memory.
It wasn't just a blur.
No. When multiple witnesses maintain the exact same bizarre, highly specific details over a lifetime without succumbing to the temptation to alter the story for dramatic effect, it heavily points to a genuine, deeply impactful event.
The sighting itself is terrifying. But what happens after you outrun a 10-foot entity?
Right. The aftermath.
The aftermath of this event is just as compelling because it completely leaves the realm of memory and enters the realm of physical medical evidence.
Very true.
As the group slid down the hill, they reported inhaling an incredibly pungent, sulfurous, sickening mist that seemed to blanket the entire area.
And this mist is where the case elevates from a visual anomaly to a physical attack. For days afterward, members of the group suffered from severe, debilitating physical symptoms.
Like what kind of symptoms?
We are talking about severe nausea, uncontrollable vomiting, and intense burning throat irritation.
Eugene Lemon was reportedly so terrified and physically sickened that he was violently throwing up at the sheriff's station later that very night.
If we look at those specific symptoms, the burning respiratory tract, the severe gastrointestinal distress, the localized lingering mist, we have to look at the chemistry.
Okay, let's hear it.
Those are the exact documented medical symptoms of exposure to hazardous, noxious chemicals. Specifically, they closely mimic the effects of exposure to sulfur mustard, commonly known as mustard gas.
Mustard gas, wow.
Yeah. Sulfur compounds react aggressively with the moisture in the human respiratory tract. When you inhale a heavy sulfurous gas, it mixes with the water in your throat and lungs to create a weak sulfuric acid. That is exactly why the witnesses felt like their throats were burning. The mist was literally causing minor chemical burns to their mucous membranes.
That brings a massive law enforcement response, obviously. Sheriff Robert Carr and Deputy Burnell Long arrived to search the area later that night.
Right.
They don't find a 10-foot entity waiting for them in the dark, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But they definitely don't find an empty, normal hillside either.
The authorities arrive, and they immediately corroborate two vital pieces of the witnesses' story. First, they encounter that strange, lingering fog settling specifically over that hillside, even though the surrounding valleys and the rest of the county are completely clear.
Just isolated right there.
Exactly. Second, they report a distinct, incredibly foul odor still hanging heavily in the air hours after the encounter.
And they find something bizarre about the ground itself. The grass at the exact site where the creature was hovering is unnaturally matted down.
Like it was crushed.
Yeah, it is compressed in a wide, defined circle. And even more startling, the ground is noticeably warm to the touch, long after the sun has gone down and the ambient temperature has dropped.
The investigation picks up again at first light. A local reporter, A. Lee Stewart Jr., who worked for the Braxton Democrat, visits the site the next morning.
Looking for a story.
He is looking for a scoop, but what he finds is physical evidence. He discovers fresh skid marks dug deep into the dirt of the field, and alongside those marks, a strange, gummy, oily deposit.
Skid marks and weird mechanical oil. That immediately paints a picture of a mechanical craft that had landed, sat there radiating heat, and then violently taken off, leaving behind torn earth and mechanical fluids.
And this incident was deemed credible enough and frightening enough to draw immediate federal attention.
The big guns.
The U.S. Air Force's Project Blue Book sent investigators to Braxton County. The Blue Book investigators officially reported on the unusual, lingering smells, but they also noted a vital detail. The trees at the top of the canopy in that specific area were singed, as if exposed to extreme, brief heat, and several thick branches were broken from the top down.
Broken from the top down.
Yes.
That suggests something heavy, incredibly hot, and descending from above had crashed or landed directly through the tree line. Now, I have to play the skeptic for a moment regarding the physical sickness.
Okay, lay it on me.
I know that pure panic and a massive adrenaline dump can make your stomach turn.
Mm-hmm.
You get terrified, your body goes into overdrive, and you throw up. But can fear alone make your throat burn for days like you've inhaled a chemical weapon?
That is the critical distinction we have to make between psychology and biology.
Right.
Mass hysteria is a well-documented phenomenon. It can cause localized physical symptoms in a group setting, like fainting, hyperventilation, or nausea.
Sure, we've seen that happen.
But mass hysteria absolutely does not cause chemical burns to the respiratory tract that persist for a week.
No way.
Furthermore, human panic cannot singe the tops of oak trees, and it cannot compress grass while leaving a residual heat signature in the soil.
Exactly.
The physical evidence strongly, undeniably supports the theory that an advanced mechanical craft was present, and that craft likely deployed a hazardous exhaust, a chemical propellant, or perhaps an active defense mechanism that physically poisoned those witnesses.
It is an incredible localized event. But to truly grasp the magnitude of what was happening in Braxton County in September of 1952, we have to zoom out.
We do.
We have to look beyond the May family and examine the surrounding towns in that exact same incredibly narrow window of time.
This brings us to a fundamental rule of anomaly research.
What's that?
A single sighting, no matter how compelling, is an anecdote. It is a story. but multiple independent sightings of similar phenomena occurring in the same geographic cluster within hours of each other.
That changes things.
That is a data set. That implies a sustained presence.
Let's look at the Audra Harper sighting. This happens just before the September 12 event in a nearby town called Heaters, which is only about 5 miles away from Flatwoods.
Very close.
Yeah. Audra and a friend are walking to a local store. The main road is rutted and muddy from recent rain, so they decide to take a shortcut through a rocky, heavily wooded area.
As they're navigating this rugged, shadowy shortcut, they spot a ball of fire resting on a nearby hill.
A ball of fire.
Yeah. Initially, Audra dismisses it. She assumes a local farmer is out hunting, maybe fox chasing with lanterns, which was a common activity.
Right.
But as she continues walking, something deep in her subconscious compels her to stop and glance back over her shoulder.
And the fire's completely gone. It hasn't burned out slowly. It has vanished instantly. And in its exact place stands a tall, dark silhouette of a man-shaped figure standing perfectly still among the rocks and boulders.
The shift from a glowing sphere to a towering humanoid entity is instantaneous. Audra and her friend experience that exact same amygdala hijack we discussed earlier.
Total panic.
They flee in absolute terror, scrambling out of the woods without looking back.
But the activity doesn't stop there. Let's fast forward to the very next night, September 13th.
Okay.
We are near a town aptly named Strange Creek, about 20 miles away from Flatwoods. George and Edith Snatowski are driving down a completely deserted rural stretch of Route 4.
Very isolated out there.
Imagine driving a 1950s automobile down a pitch-black country road. No streetlights, no cell phones, just the weak glow of the headlights cutting through the trees. And they have their 18-month-old baby in the back seat.
As they are driving through this isolated valley, the car engine inexplicably dies.
Just dies.
It completely stalls out. The headlights dim, the radio cuts out, and they are left coasting to a halt in the pitch black.
Which is absolutely fascinating, because if you know anything about UFO history, a car engine dying is the hallmark sign of electromagnetic interference from a craft.
It is the classic symptom.
It really is. An intense electromagnetic field essentially shorts out the electrical system of an internal combustion engine.
It is a massive red flag. The car dies, and suddenly that exact same foul, sulfurous smell, that sickening mist the May family encountered, fills the air around the vehicle, permeating the cabin and causing the baby to wake up and start crying.
Then the darkness is shattered by a brilliant, blinding light. Hovering right in front of their stalled vehicle is a 10-foot-tall entity.
10 feet tall again.
But the description here has a fascinating, vital variation from the Flatwoods sighting. This creature lacks the pointed, spade-shaped hood. Instead, the Snatowskis describe it as having an exposed, bony, explicitly reptilian head.
And its lower half isn't described as a pleated metallic dress. The Snatowskis describe the entity as being concealed within a hovering metallic cone.
The creature slowly approaches the car. It reaches out with a lizard-like, spindly, clawed hand and actually drags those claws across the metal hood of the Snatowskis' car, leaving a physical sound and vibration.
That is just bone-chilling.
Then it simply floats off into the dense woods. And the second it is out of sight, the electromagnetic field lifts and the car engine spontaneously restarts.
Unbelievable.
George Snatowski was so shaken by this that he later went on the record, putting his reputation on the line, and gave his full, detailed account to researchers in 1955.
The corroborating nature of these stories forces us to reevaluate the entire Flatwoods incident. We're moving away from a strange, isolated, local legend. We are entering the territory of a genuine close encounter of the third kind, where an actual entity is observed in conjunction with a craft.
Okay, let's play with this data for a second. Think about a deep-sea diver in an atmospheric diving suit.
Okay, I am with you.
You have the heavy brass helmet, the thick, rigid body armor necessary to withstand the crushing pressure of the ocean. Could the Flatwoods Monster's weird pleated dress and that bizarre spade-shaped hood actually have been an environmental spacesuit?
Oh, that is an interesting thought.
Right. A mechanical apparatus required for a reptilian pilot to survive in our atmosphere. And perhaps, by the next night during the Snatowski sighting, that suit was either removed for repairs or maybe damaged during the crash, revealing the bony reptilian pilot inside that hovering metallic cone.
Researchers in the decades following the event have posited similar theories, and it is a brilliant way to reconcile the visual differences perfectly.
It makes a lot of sense.
The Flatwoods group sees the fully suited entity operating a heavy, restrictive survival suit. The Snitowski family sees the unhelmeted pilot operating a lower mobility transport unit, the metallic cone.
It lines up.
When you synthesize these separate accounts, the matching details create an incredibly compelling pattern. You have the distinct sulfur smell appearing in both locations. You have the towering 10-foot height. You have the technological interference causing the car to die. You have the hovering, gliding motion instead of walking.
It is too much to just be chance.
Exactly. It defies simple coincidence. We're looking at a localized flap of highly advanced, non-human activity across a 48-hour window.
But as we always do, we have to flip the coin.
Let's look at the other side.
We have to look through the skeptical lens and search for the grounded scientific truth. Because not everyone believes an interstellar reptile in a brass diving suit was roaming Route 4.
And this brings us to the extensive, rigorous investigation conducted by Joe Nickell.
Who is he?
Nickell is a prominent paranormal investigator and a senior research fellow for the Committee for the Scientific Investigation of Claims of the Paranormal. He approached this famous case decades later, meticulously acting like a detective, looking for earthly, rational explanations for every single supernatural element reported.
Let's start with the inciting incident, the glowing object streaking across the sky that the boys saw. Nickell dug into the astronomical records and found that it wasn't a crashing spaceship at all.
No, it wasn't.
It was a highly visible meteor. Historical records confirm that a brilliant meteor crossed 3 states, Maryland, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia, precisely at that exact date and time.
And Nickell thoroughly addresses the question of why the boys thought it crashed right on their neighbor's farm.
How does he explain that?
It boils down to a known optical illusion regarding how the human brain processes distance. When a distant, incredibly bright meteor crosses the horizon, the human eye lacks the necessary depth perception to accurately judge its true distance against a dark sky.
It messes with your perspective.
Yes. It appears to duck just behind the closest hill, deceiving the brain into thinking it landed locally. In reality, it was burning up miles away in the upper atmosphere. It is the same illusion that makes a harvest moon look massive when it sits low on the horizon.
The meteor illusion makes perfect scientific sense. But what about the 10-foot glowing-eyed monster in the metal dress?
Right, the monster.
Nichols' explanation for this is legendary in skeptical circles. It is known as the barn owl theory. Let's break down the anatomy of this theory piece by piece.
Nickell posits that the group was highly agitated. They were expecting to find a crashed meteor or a Soviet satellite. They hike up into the dark, their adrenaline is pumping, and they stumble upon a common barn owl perched on a low-hanging tree branch.
I'm trying to picture how an owl, a bird that weighs maybe a pound, becomes the Flatwoods Monster.
It relies heavily on visual misinterpretation fueled by absolute panic and poor lighting. First, let's look at the face. A barn owl has a very distinct, heart-shaped, pale facial disc.
Yeah, they do look pretty weird.
In the shifting, chaotic shadows of a single flashlight beam cutting through fog, Nickell argues this heart shape created the optical illusion of the spade-shaped hood framing a darker face.
Okay. And the twisted, claw-like hands extending from the torso.
Those were simply the owl's talons, gripped tightly around the tree branch it was perched on. Because an owl sits upright, its talons are positioned high up near its chest, resembling strange, shortened arms.
What about the glowing orange-green eyes?
That is an understood biological phenomenon called tapetum lucidum.
Tapetum lucidum?
Yes. It is a reflective layer situated immediately behind the retina in the eyes of many nocturnal predators. When Eugene Lemon hit the owl with the intense beam of the flashlight, the photons passed through the owl's retina, hit that reflective layer, and bounced back out, amplifying the light.
Like a cat's eyes reflecting light.
Exactly. It makes the eyes appear to intensely glow in the dark, which is a classic startle reflex trigger for humans.
And the dark green pleated metal dress.
Nickell suggests that in the pitch black, the dense foliage, vines, and leaves hanging beneath the branch blended seamlessly with the owl's silhouette. The flak light only illuminated the bird's upper half clearly, while the lower half merged with the forest geometry, creating the illusion of a wide skirt-like lower body.
What about the physical evidence, though? The pulsing red light they saw before the flashlight even illuminated the creature. The skid marks. The strange oil.
Nickel acted like a cold case detective and systematically debunked those physical elements as well. He concluded the pulsing red light was likely a distant airplane hazard beacon seen through the swaying trees.
And the skid marks.
As for the skid marks and the gummy deposit found by the reporter the next day, Nickel actually tracked those back to a local resident named Max Lockard. Nickel discovered that Lockard had driven his 1942 Chevy pickup truck up that exact same dirt hill earlier in the evening to look around for the meteor.
Oh, wow.
The supposed landing gear skid marks were just his truck tires digging into the dirt, and the mysterious gummy deposit was just a simple, mundane oil leak from an old 1940s engine.
Nickel also brings up the lighting conditions, which is crucial to understanding how the human brain fails us. This happened at 7:15 p.m. in mid-September. Sunset wasn't until 7:36 p.m., so it wasn't pitch black, it was twilight.
And human vision is notoriously dangerously unreliable during twilight. It is a biological transition period.
Your eyes are adjusting.
Exactly. As the eye adapts from daylight to darkness, a process called the Purkinje shift occurs. We lose our color vision because our eyes transition from using cone cells, which detect color and detail, to rod cells, which only detect light and shadow.
That makes sense.
Our depth perception severely degrades. It is the absolute prime condition for pareidolia, the psychological phenomenon where the mind responds to a stimulus by perceiving a familiar pattern where none exists.
You see shapes in the clouds.
Right. You see a shape in the shifting shadows, and your frightened, adrenaline-soaked brain fills in the terrifying details to complete the picture of a monster.
Wait. I accept the logic of the Chevy truck leaking oil, and the meteor illusion is a solid, verifiable scientific fact. But I have to stop you on the owl.
You don't buy the owl.
An owl? Really? Let's think about the actual behavior described by the witnesses. Have you ever seen an owl emit a mechanical, sustained hiss and then levitate or glide unsteadily toward a group of screaming people?
Well, no.
If you point a blinding military-issue flashlight at a perched bird in the dark, it doesn't hover menacingly in a metallic dress. It flies away. It violently flaps its wings and escapes the light.
That is a fair point.
And an owl certainly doesn't emit a cloud of dense sulfur gas that causes a grown man to violently vomit at the police station hours later.
That is the exact friction point where the skeptical theory really begins to strain under the weight of the evidence.
Yeah.
Now, to be completely fair to Joe Nickel, his methodology was rigorous, and he never mocked the witnesses. He explicitly noted that they experienced genuine, paralyzing fear, stating, "There but by fortune go you or I."
He respected their experience.
He did. He acknowledged they saw something in those woods that fundamentally terrified them. However, if we look at the entire data set, the barn owl theory is a neat, tidy psychological explanation, but it completely fails to explain the physical aftermath.
You fall short.
It completely fails to explain the singed treetops found by the official Air Force investigators. It completely ignores the corroborating Snitowski case with the metallic hovering cone. And crucially, it offers absolutely zero medical explanation for the lingering, documented mustard gas symptoms.
That is the sticking point for me. You don't get chemical burns in your throat from looking at a bird.
You really don't.
So while science gives us a highly plausible psychological framework for how panic can distort vision, the physical evidence left behind in the dirt and in the lungs of the witnesses keeps the door to the paranormal wide open.
And anytime a paranormal door is left ajar, especially in the 1950s, someone is going to walk through it to tell a story and make a dime.
Enter the opportunists.
Which brings us to the myth makers, the opportunists, and how this localized, terrifying event exploded into global lore.
Because almost immediately after the sighting, the media circus descended on Flatwoods. The quiet town was overrun. Enter a man named Gray Barker.
Oh, Gray Barker.
He was a freelance writer who investigated the case for a wildly popular pulp publication called Fate magazine in 1953, writing a sensationalized article titled The Monster and the Saucer.
Gray Barker is a wildly pivotal and highly controversial figure in the history of anomaly research. He basically used the Flatwoods incident as the launching pad for his entire career.
He saw an opportunity.
He realized the public had a voracious appetite for this narrative. He went on to write a seminal book in 1956 called They Knew Too Much About Flying Saucers.
And we need to pause on this, because this is a massive piece of pop culture history.
It is huge.
That specific book is what introduced the terrifying concept of the Men in Black to the global public.
The Men in Black, exactly.
The entire idea of dark-suited, intimidating government agents silencing witnesses to protect extraterrestrial secrets. That modern archetype essentially traces back to Gray Barker leveraging his fame from the Flatwoods case to create a new mythology.
But here is the massive problem with Gray Barker being our primary historian for the early era of the unexplained. The truth, well, it gets entirely lost in the sauce of sensationalism.
Yeah, it really does.
Barker was, by his own later admissions and the extensive evidence found in his personal archives, a fabulist. He operated in an era of pulp magazines where the only rule was to sell copies.
Make money.
He openly admitted in private correspondence to deliberately inserting purely fictional chapters into his supposed nonfiction books simply to make them more thrilling. He knew that raw facts were often dry, but government conspiracies and towering monsters sold exceptionally well.
It gets even more complicated. He didn't just embellish testimony. He actively participated in creating elaborate hoaxes.
Like the Lost Creek film.
Yes. There is a famous piece of footage from that era called the Lost Creek UFO film. Barker and his associates literally took a hamburger-sized ceramic model of a flying saucer, dangled it on a fishing wire against a cloudy sky, filmed it on a shaky camera, and then passed it off as authentic footage.
It is wild that people believed it.
They played this film during paid college lectures to intentionally whip up a frenzy and sell more books.
And this tendency to co-opt, alter, and sensationalize the narrative didn't stop with Barker in the 1950s. The Flatwoods archetype, the hovering, cloaked, faceless entity, is so visually potent that people continuously try to borrow it to legitimize their own stories.
It just keeps coming back.
Fast forward to 2004. A Mexican researcher heavily promoted a video of a supposed flying, cloaked entity in Nuevo León, dubbing it the Monterey Witch.
I remember that video.
He explicitly and publicly attempted to link the sighting back to the Flatwoods Monster, arguing it was the same species. It shows how desperately people want to connect dots across decades and borders to validate these deep-seated archetypes.
So if the guy writing the original history books is a known fiction writer and admitted hoaxer, and modern researchers are constantly bending facts to fit a preconceived narrative, how do we, the listeners, separate the actual terrifying event from the Hollywood script?
It is tough.
How do we know any of this isn't just a campfire story that got out of hand?
That is the essential, difficult challenge of archival research. You have to meticulously distill the timeline and strip away the later additions, the sensationalism and the pulp fiction.
Right, get down to the core.
If you surgically remove Gray Barker's dramatizations and you ignore the later internet rumors and copycat sightings, what are you actually left with?
Not much, but what is there is compelling.
Exactly. You are left with the original 1952 police reports filed by Sheriff Carr. You are left with the physical evidence logged by federal investigators from Project Blue Book. And most importantly, you are left with the May family's unwavering, unembellished, lifelong testimonies.
They never changed their story.
They never tried to monetize their story. They never went on speaking tours. They never changed the details to make it more exciting. That serves as the pure, untainted core of the mystery. It proves that long before Gray Barker started spinning tales to sell magazines, something truly inexplicable and genuinely dangerous landed in those woods.
And from those dark woods, that inexplicable something walked right out and conquered the modern world.
Let's transition to the present day, because the legacy of the Flatwoods Monster has morphed into something entirely unexpected and honestly kind of hilarious.
The cryptid craze.
Yes, we are talking about the Appalachian cryptid craze.
West Virginia has fully, unabashedly embraced its incredibly rich supernatural tapestry. They have recognized that their folklore is unique. We aren't just talking about Flatwoods either. Oh no, there are so many.
You have the Mothman in Point Pleasant, which have its own massive festival. You have the Grafton Monster, the Veggie Men of Fairmont, the Bell Witch, the Wampus Cat, and of course, Bigfoot. The state has realized that folklore isn't something to hide. It is a massive cultural and economic asset.
Massive doesn't even begin to cover it. According to the state's Department of Tourism, the economic impact of tourism brought in an astonishing $9.1 billion to the state in 2024.
Whoa.
$9.1 billion. People are flocking to these small rural towns specifically to hike the spooky paranormal trails and buy the merchandise.
And the town of Sutton, which sits just south of Flatwoods in Braxton County, is the absolute epicenter for this specific legend. They host the Flatwoods Monster Museum, which sees a constant stream of visitors from all over the globe.
People from everywhere.
People travel from Japan, Germany, and the UK just to see the archives. The community pride is palpable and genuine. If you drive through the county today, you will find 5 massive, custom-built, intricately painted monster chairs designed specifically for tourist photo ops.
They even have these highly sought-after ceramic lantern souvenirs. These were originally made by the local Junior Chamber of Commerce way back in the 1960s as a community fundraiser, and they are still hand-molded and sold today.
That is amazing.
But there is a fascinating sociological shift happening here, a phenomenon that experts and sociologists are calling cutification.
Cutification is a brilliant term to describe this psychological process. It describes how a terrifying, noxious, 10-foot entity that caused a trained soldier to vomit in terror has slowly, over decades, morphed into a beloved, almost cuddly local mascot.
They gave it a nickname.
The locals affectionately call it Braxy.
It is so true. You go to a festival in Sutton and you can buy Braxy stickers, Braxy plush toys, and latex masks handmade by local vendors.
It is wild.
And a big driver of this economic boom is that cryptids, unlike corporate superheroes or animated characters, are entirely copyright-free. This is an open-source mythology. It allows local artists, marginalized groups, and quirky communities to express their identities freely and build sustainable small businesses entirely around the lore.
But the cutification of the Flatwoods Monster isn't just a local West Virginia phenomenon. It has achieved genuine, undeniable global pop culture domination. And nowhere is this cultural export more evident than in Japan.
Yes. In Japan, the monster is known as the 3M no Uchujin, which translates to the 3-meter-tall alien.
It is a massive deal over there.
It is a massive deal in Japanese media, appearing in anime, manga, and television shows.
And its specific, iconic visual design, the spade-shaped head, the glowing, piercing eyes, the mechanical pleated dress, made it absolutely perfect for the video game industry, especially in the 8-bit era where distinct silhouettes were necessary.
So many video games.
It appeared as the final boss in the classic NES game Amagon. It was featured as the boss named Paranoia in the Sega Genesis classic Space Harrier II. It was a boss in the arcade game Tumble Pop.
And perhaps most famously for millions of gamers, the Flatwoods Monster heavily inspired the terrifying alien invaders, known simply as Them in the Legend of Zelda, Majora's Mask.
Oh, I remember those.
The glowing, hovering entities that come to abduct the cows at Romani Ranch.
More recently, the monster was introduced to an entirely new generation in the blockbuster video game Fallout 76. Because the game is set in a post-apocalyptic version of West Virginia, the developers leaned heavily into local cryptid lore to build the world.
It was a huge feature in the game.
In the game, the Flatwoods Monster appears as a telepathic, hovering, hostile alien. This digital representation sparked massive renewed interest to the point where players are showing up to the real-life town of Flatwoods dressed in full, elaborate Fallout cosplay to attend the annual festivals.
I just have to laugh at the cosmic irony of this entire situation.
Imagine being a fearsome, technologically advanced entity. You travel light years across the unforgiving, freezing vacuum of the galaxy.
Oh, that way.
You survive atmospheric entry. You crash land in a rugged forest. You deploy your toxic defense mechanisms to survive, just to end up, 70 years later, as a cuddly plush toy on a tourist's dashboard and a boss fight in a Zelda game. That is wild.
It is humorous, but if we reflect on this culturally, it reveals a profound psychological truth about humanity. Turning our deepest, darkest fears into toys, video games, and street festivals is a deeply ingrained collective coping mechanism. By domesticating the monster, by wearing its face as a mask and giving it a cute nickname like Braxy, we diminish its power over us. We conquer the visceral fear of the unknown by dragging it out of the dark woods, inviting it into the light, and celebrating it.
Let's summarize this incredible journey we've been on today. We started on a terrifying, misty, sulfur-choked night in 1952 with a group of terrified locals who experienced something that shattered their reality.
We really covered a lot.
We navigated the sharp scientific debates, weighing the physics of barn owls and optical meteor illusions against the physical evidence of singed trees and inexplicable chemical sickness.
Right.
We waded through the murky waters of opportunists and hoaxers who blurred the lines of history for a profit. And we watched as a literal nightmare transformed into a cultural phenomenon that spans from rural Appalachia to the screens of gamers worldwide. The enduring possibility that a genuine, unexplained event occurred in those woods remains remarkably resilient.
Which leaves us with one final, provocative thought to consider.
Let's hear it.
We've spent this entire time looking at the event from the perspective of the terrified humans, but let's flip the script for a moment. Imagine that the Flatwoods Monster was exactly what it appeared to be. An extraterrestrial pilot whose craft suffered a catastrophic mechanical malfunction.
Okay, stranded.
Stranded in the dark, bleeding heat, breathing a toxic atmosphere it couldn't survive in without a heavy, restrictive environmental suit, it stepped out of the wreckage to ask the locals for help, only to be met by a screaming, panicked group of humans shining blinding lights directly in its face before they turned and fled into the night. If that scenario is true, who was really the monster in the dark that night?
Wow. That entirely changes the perspective.
Yeah.
What do you think landed in Braxton County on that September evening? Was it a misidentified owl, a secret Cold War government project, or a stranded traveler from the stars?
We want to know.
Leave your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the unknown, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Hunted Podcast, and share this deep dive with a friend who loves a good mystery.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the unexplained. We appreciate your time and your curiosity.
Keep looking up, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next deep dive.